Raisi v'hine menoras of kula. So Zechariah Navi saw in the image of his nevuah that he had an entirely golden menorah, v'gula al roisha, or v'goyla al roisha. There was this thing on top of it that would drip oil into the candles. V'shiva neiraseh aleha, and there were 7 candles upon it. Goyim. It's explained in the Torah. It's actually on this week's parsha in the Torah in Parsha Baloischa. Let's skip the brackets 4 lines down to the end of the line. At the end of after the brackets, Sheneiris Nikroim Neshamas. Candles are souls. V'shiva neirasah, and it's 7 candles. Heim Neshamas Hashiva Roim. These are the souls of the 7 shepherds of Klal Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu was called a shepherd. David HaMelech was called a shepherd. These are all leaders of Klal Yisrael. They're called shepherds. Shehem hamashpim alaklus leklalus neshamas Yisrael. They give down the flow of godliness to the general neshamas of the Eden. Because just like a shepherd feeds his flock, so he feeds his flock physical food. These spiritual shepherds, they feed their flock, Klal Yisrael, spiritual food, godliness to the whole Klal Yisrael. Now, why is there the idea of 7 shepherds? Like earlier over there in Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe speaks about the concept of the 7 candles. The 7 candles represent 7 levels in the service of Hashem. Yesh Ovid Ma'ave, there are those that serve out of love of Hashem. The way it comes down from Avram, who's the one that loves me, meaning there's a service out of love, and so on. There are all the different services. So there are 7 shepherds of Klal Yisrael, hinted in the 7 branches of the menorah of Zechariah, which is necessary for the 7 types of service of Hashem that's to be found amongst Klal Yisrael. The Klalos Neshamas Yisrael Nikroim b'Shem menorah zav klula, and the entire Klal Yisrael is called an entirely golden menorah. Ad kan l'shoyne. This is the quote of the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe. V'hainu, so the Rebbe says, what is he trying to conclude by saying that the entire menorah is entirely gold? The L'chura hayafshar loymar, seemingly we could have said, shekashem she'mucholokim b'sugyad v'dasam, just like the Jewish people are distinct and different, each one in their types of service. This one serves with this attribute, this one serves with that character trait. Perhaps in a similar vein, they are different in other matters. They are not entirely gold. Some are maybe gold and some are maybe less than gold. Therefore he says, therefore the entire Klal Yisrael is called an entirely golden menorah. Zahav daika, specifically he says gold. This is the most elevated thing, the most valuable thing. Because gold is the most valued, that's why it's the first one of the things that is enumerated in Parshas Truma, where it speaks about how the Mishkan, which also relates to the Beis HaMikdash, was built. It's the first one that's enumerated. Like it says, Zav, gold, v'kesef, and silver, v'nchayshes, and copper or brass, v'goymer. So someone's going to challenge and say, but it says also about the precious stones of the shoyam stones and so on. So he says, Shari avne shoyam v'avne miluyim, those precious stones, those were not in the building of the Mishkan, those were in the Kohen Gadol's garments. But in the Mishkan, the most valuable thing was gold, as it was enumerated first. So that's the message that it says that despite the fact that different Jews have different types of service, still in all, they are all considered gold. All the Yidden are the highest level, the level of gold. Ois Beis, last paragraph on the page. Mamshech B'Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe B'Likutei Torah continues, Medrash Isa, the Koya Allah said love. In the Medrash it's brought down that this Nevuah of Zechariah, that he saw the 7 candles and he saw it's entirely gold, it's referring to Mashiach's times. How come? Because the Medrash says to be able to say that it's entirely gold, that's not possible now. Because at this time, before the Geula, there is things that are dross, things that are waste products. The gold is not pure gold. But concerning the future time, that's when Zechariah and Navi said, Menoira Zav Kula, it's an entirely golden menorah. So too it's in the Medrash on the Pasuk that says, you are entirely beautiful, my beloved, that this is referring to Mashiach's times that we say that the Jewish people are entirely beautiful. But in another place in the Medrash it's brought down that it's not even referring to Mashiach's times. Yirmiyah Navi said that they were called a despised silver. Yecheskel koide oisam sigim, and Yecheskel Navi in the pasuk calls the Yidden dross, or the waste product after refining precious metals. And to counter that, Zechariah came and said, other than they did. V'amar, he said, Ra'isi, and I saw v'hine menoira zahav kula, behold, an entirely golden menorah. Shel zahav he, it is golden. Top of the next page, kula, entirely. L'kayim mashakasav, to fulfill, to express what it says in the pasuk about the Jewish people, kulech yafa rayasi, that you are entirely beautiful, my beloved. So instead of like one medrash seems to indicate that this is talking specifically about the time of Mashiach. That's when Zechariah said you are entirely beautiful. The other medrash says no, that this is specifically to counter what other Nevi'im may have said negatively about the Eden. The entirely gold is referring to the Jewish people at present, before Mashiach comes. From this it's indicated that obviously Zechariah is referring on the present time, because if he's countering Yirmiyah Yecheskel, Davada Yirmiyah Yecheskel Shedibru B'Tachlis HaMusar, surely Yirmiyahu Hanavi, Yecheskel Hanavi, that spoke in such very musar fashion, very rebuking fashion, like Kivnu Ki'im Alzman Da'achshav. They are only intended on the present time, not on the future time. They wouldn't have said that the Yidden are like despised silver or like dross when it comes to Mashiach. So if he was countering what they were saying, so Zechariah came in response to Yecheskel and Yirmiyahu Navi, and he said, that they are an entirely golden menorah. Again, Ad Kan Lashoini, up till here is a quote of the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Torah, and the Rebbe is going to broaden on this idea that the Alter Rebbe just said. The Rebbe says, we can add to what the Alter Rebbe says, Zechariah Navi followed Yirmiyahu Yecheskel. In history, Yirmiyahu and Yecheskel were much earlier than Zechariah. Shehem hayu koydem churban bayis rishon. Yirmiyahu Hanavi and Yecheskel Hanavi lived even before the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. V'chagi, Zechariah, Malachi, hayu bezman bayis sheni. These were the three last Nevi'im, and they lived in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash. She'oz chasro heidvar. In the second Beis HaMikdash, there were 5 things lacking in the Beis HaMikdash. There was no Aron, there was no Luchas, there was no fire coming down from heaven to take the Korbanos, etc. Va'afal Pikein, despite the fact that in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, it was the whole entire spiritual situation was less than the situation was in the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, meaning in the lifetime of Yirmiyahu and Yechezkel. Still in all, Amar Oz Menoira Zav Kula, he said about the Jewish people, they are entirely a golden menorah. You say them as even more so, Zechariah Amar Zois Bizman Golus Bavel. When did Zechariah actually say this nevuah? He said it in the time of Golus Bavel. The Rebbe brings in a footnote because the Yidden in that nevuah are called Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel means they were planted in Bavel. Zeru is from the word Zera, Bavel and Bavel. They were in the Golus Bavel. So at that time, when Zechariah said it, it wasn't even in a time when there was a Beis HaMikdash. It was in a time when they were in Golus. So it's not just that they were in the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, which is lower than the first Beis HaMikdash. It was even worse than that. They were in a time of Golus. Still in all, v'hainu shegam bezman hagolus, even in the time of exile, in a Kol Yisrael, in menorah zav kula, the entire Kol Yisrael are an entirely golden menorah, shem betachlis ha'ilui, they're in the ultimate state of elevation. As we said before, gold is the most precious of metals. So the Rebbe continues further in elaborating upon the second paragraph on the page. We can explain this even deeper. This itself is the reason for it. The Golus is the reason for this high level, higher than what Yirmiyahu and Yechezkel said about the Yidden. Specifically because they are in the time of Golus, they are an entirely golden menorah. The idea behind this is the Niksiv, it says in the Pasuk, Goyla al Roisha. What does it mean, Goyla al Roisha? Again, the simple meaning is it's a type of container, a type of receptacle that would hold the oil, that from that would come down like a little pipe into every one of the candles of the candelabra that oil should go into. But the Chazal have a deeper meaning to the word Goyla. There are 2 explanations in the above mentioned medrash that we mentioned before. Chad Omer v'Goyla Lashon Golus. One says that Goyla is from the expression exile. V'Chad Amar Goyala. One says you got to read it with inserting an aleph, the one that redeemed her. Man the Amar Goyla. What the opinion that says Goyla says Shegoyla leBavel, because she went into exile to Bavel. V'Golsa Shechina imahem, and the Shechina went into exile upon us. The Shechina went to exile with them, and therefore the Goyla is al Roisha. The Shechina is upon the heads of the Yidden, even though they are in exile. Man the Amar Goyla Piruka, and the one that holds her Redeemer, that means in the word freedom, the one that releases her. As we know, Hashem is called our Redeemer. His name is Tzvokos. Hashem Tzvokos. And it says, Allah, the one that burst forth, which is going Mashiach, will rise before them. Vashem beroisham, and Hashem is upon their head. Literally means Hashem goes ahead of them, but it means also upon their head, just like this type of Goyla was on top of the menorah. The Rebbe says we could explain the matching up of these 2 explanations, which seem to be completely 2 extremes. One is going on exile, one is going on Geula. So he says, through the level of Goyla from the word exile. Goyla leBavel, she's going into exile into Bavel, Magiyim leGoyla, Lashon Geula. We reach the level of Goyla from the expression redemption. Just like it was in the exile Mitzrayim. It says in the Haftorah of Parsha Shmos, says those that came, that Yaakov rooted in Mitzrayim, in the exile Mitzrayim. So then afterwards it says in the pasuk, Yotzitu Parach Yisrael, that Yisrael blossomed and bloomed. So in other words, the very going into Mitzrayim brought to the blossoming of the Geula. So too it's in the exile of Bavel, Sha'oz Nikroim, Klolis Yisrael, Zerubbabel. So then the whole entire Klal Yisrael is called Zerubbabel. Another meaning of Zerubbabel is, Bavel is in the word Bilbel. Adam hamevulvel im toiv imra, someone that is mixed up, good with bad, like it says, V'zarati is base Yisrael, I will sow and I will plant. The house of Yisrael, Zera Adam, Zera Behema, human seed and animal seed, meaning good and bad, negative and positive together. Hine Golus Bavel, who Harishim Mikal Adal Golius, Golus Bavel is the first of all the 4 exiles. The Rebbe in the brackets talks about that even though Golus Mitzrayim preceded it, but it was before the Jewish people were a nation, before Matan Torah. So, but once the Yidden were a nation and they were reigning at Yisrael, Golus Bavel was the first of them. Let's skip over 3 lines after the brackets, 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Concerning the general idea of exile, the Chazal said, Hashem did charity with the Yidden, that he scattered them amongst the nations. The simple explanation is that the scattering amongst the nations is that the nations cannot destroy them because they'll be, if they attack them in one place, they'll be able to escape to another place, etc. But in a similar vein, in a spiritual vein, that means that it's charitable to them because the Yidden gain from the exile. Specifically through going to exile to Bavel, and they refined the head of gold, that this is an image in a dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, that Daniel interpreted for him. And there was a whole statue, a huge statue, and that head of gold represented Bavel. So through refining the head of gold of Klippa, through dealing and elevating the gold of Klippa, so that itself brought them to be an entirely golden menorah. So in a similar vein, that's why it says the word Goyla means both Golus and Geula, because from the Golus we come to this higher state of the Geula, of the redemption. So after analyzing and explaining that section of Likkutei Torah, the Rebbe goes to quote the following part. Ois Gimel, and Likkutei Torah continues to explain why is the whole Klal Yisrael called a menorah? Just like the menorah is one solid piece of gold. Like it says in Parshas Baal Lois Chavazem, Ma'isa menorah mixtures of. This is the making of the menorah. Has to be solid gold. Till its leg, until its blossoms of flowers on it, it has to be one solid piece. So Rashi explains it was a solid bar of gold, and you would form it by hitting it with a hammer to shape it into the forms of the menorah. So through hammering it, when you're hammering a piece of metal into shape, so then there becomes a mix. What's on the top goes to the bottom, what's in the bottom goes to the top, and everything becomes mixed up. Elyon betachtim betachtim be'elyon, the upper part to the lower part, and the lower part to the upper part. So the same thing, Kach Kol Yisrael, so too all Yidden are combined one within the other. The simple meaning, they are guarantors for each other. But it means, the fact that it doesn't say Arevim Zeh Loza, which would mean guarantors, but Zeh Boza, this one in the other, this means that they are mixed together one with another. That's why it says till its foot, till its flower, it's one solid piece. The legs, that's the lower levels. Just like a leg is an extremity, it's outside of the trunk of the body. Upircha, that's the blossoms, the blooms, the flowers. That's the highest levels. Al derech yatzu parach Yisrael, similar to what it says that we had before about Golos Mitzrayim, that the Yidden will blossom and bloom. So we have that concept as well. Of Yesh Lahois, but we can add to this Al Pi Mashkos Vat Tzemach Tzedek, according to what the Tzemach Tzedek wrote. The mixture, and explaining the idea of mixture. She'ein ze rak mishakosar abachaye shemakshe remez la'achdus shezeu in Yisroel HaChaim. The Bechaye already, the Bechaye commentary on the Chumash explains that mixture hints at unity. Shezeu in Yisroel HaChaim. That's the idea that says there's the bond of life. Tzroil means like a knot, cleaving and oneness. Even more so, Miksha shows that it's one piece. There's a way of bonding and tying together two separate pieces. So it's still a unity, but it's a unity of parts. Just like if you would, let's say, make a menorah, theoretically, you could make it out of parts if it wasn't, if you wouldn't have had this obligation. When you talk about mixture, you're talking about taking one bar of gold, one solid piece of metal, and you're continually keeping it together. It's not a matter of separation of separate pieces that are being connected. The fact that mixture is one solid piece, that hints at something high. Similar to the idea of Yochid. Yochid is a unity that's beyond the word of Echad. Echad shows on a unity that could be a unity of parts, whereas Yochid indicates its singularity, its single and onlyness, it's one single piece. The idea behind this is when you use the word echad, the achdus indicates that they are two separate matters, but they're separate matters that they are joined together. Let's skip the brackets again. 4 lines till after that little number 43. The fact that you're binding two separate things together, it still indicates that there's a matter of division and separation. As opposed to the level of Yachid, that means initially it is one item. That's the idea that's hammered out as one. From this understood that miksha is even higher than the unity of where it says you are standing all today. Though in Torah it's explained the great advantage and quality of all of you that it says in Atam Nitzavim, Rebbe says they become one together as one. There's still the division of levels that it speaks about over there in the pasuk Roshechem, Shiftechem, your heads of tribes, your water carriers, your wood choppers, etc. But they are in a way that all of you, and you're together. Okay, like it's explained over there in Likutei Torah on Atam Nitzavim, that's analogous to a person that he has a full stature of a person. He has a head and he has feet. Though the feet are the end of the levels of the person, they are below. And the head is on top and much more higher than the feet. Mikol Makim, higher not just physically, but qualitatively and so on. Mekal Makim still in all in one degree, in one aspect, there is an advantage and quality in the feet. Because you need the feet to walk with, that the head cannot do the walking. They are on what the head and trunk stand on. The foot brings the head to a place that he couldn't reach there on his own. Even when there's some heaviness in the head, the person has some type of pain in their head or some type of weakness in their head. Top of the next page, makizim dam baraglai. You can even let blood in the feet. Acupuncturists, I believe, do this. They'll put the needles, maybe even by the toes, etc. When nearpani becomes healed, and the head is now receiving its vitality from and through the feet. Nimtza comes out, that the head is not complete without the feet. Until the person cannot distinguish between the head and the foot, because in some matters the foot is a head, because the foot contributes to the head. Yet, even in that case of unity between the head and the feet, there's still distinctions. There still remains a distinction between the head and the foot. The head is above and the foot is below. And higher than this, the miksha is the unity of being hammered out from one solid block, from one solid bar of gold. Like we said before, it's what was above now becomes below. What's below becomes above. The one above descends below. The one that's below ascends above. That's the ultimate unity. So therefore, the miksha, the solid state of the menorah, is a powerful unity of Klal Yisrael. The miksha kosher, the menorah zav, the idea that it's solid gold, or the solid piece of the menorah, is connected also with the fact that it's a golden menorah, like we said before, miksha zav. Like the Rambam writes that they're interconnected. The menorah being made out of gold and being out of one solid piece are interdependent. The obligation to make the menorah out of one solid piece, without like putting together made together from different parts, is only if they made the menorah out of gold. Not always could the Yidden afford gold. For example, when the Yidden returned from Golus with Ezra, from Golus Bavel, initially they could not afford to have a golden menorah. But if they made it from other metals, when there was no state of riches in the Beis Hamikdash, then even if it's not made from one solid piece of metal, it's kosher. So we're going to see this interesting idea then, that how powerful the oneness is. According to what we said earlier in the second ois, Zechariah said this nevu in the time of Golus. And during the time of Golus was when the whole Klal Yisrael is called entirely gold. So therefore, move on, it's understood from this, Shagama Ilui, the Miksho Bizmana Golus Dafke, also the advantage of being a solid piece. In other words, this Achdus is specifically in the time of Golus. So now the Rebbe is going to continue again, taking another piece of the Maimon of the Torah and elaborating on it. Ois Daled, the Mamshabul of the Torah continues, Shagam HaMitzvahs Krim Neris. Also the mitzvahs are called candles. Because of Kiner Mitzvah, that the mitzvah is called a candle. The actual word Ner in the Torah is referring to one part of the entire candle item. There is the container, there is the metal thing that holds the oil, and there's the oil and there's the wick. Of those three, the actual neir, according to Torah language, is that vessel that contains the oil and the wick. Also, additional to that, the oil and the wick itself are called ner. This means Hashem and mitzvahs. The oil and the wick, that's the mitzvahs. The Yidden are like the containing vessel to the oil and the wick, Shema mitzvahs, that they are the mitzvahs. That's why the Jewish people are called the land of desire. Why are they likened to a land? Shebehem zora Baruch Hu mitzvahs, the Medrash says, that Hashem planted the mitzvahs in the Yidden. As for example, the mitzvah of tefillin is specifically fulfilled when a Jewish person places them on his head. As opposed to a non-Jew places them on his head, no revelation, no spiritual thing is accomplished with it, because only a Yid is considered the land in which Hashem planted the mitzvahs. So the same thing, the Yidden are the receptacle in which the oil and the wick of the mitzvah is placed inside. Just like a candle, you need to light it with fire. Then the candle fulfills its purpose and its mission. So too it's in the candle of a mitzvah. That's, we said, there's the Yid and there's the mitzvah that he does. It's kindled through Torah, which is the fire. Through the Torah is revealed the supernal delight that's enclosed in the mitzvahs. This is what we say when we make the bracha on the mitzvahs, that he sanctified us in his mitzvahs and he commanded us. So the Rebbe explains, Asher meloshen ashrei. Asher is from the word fortunate, which means pleasant, enjoyable. Shuloshen shevach v'hilul, it's an expression of praise. Dainu oine ge'elyin, this means that the supernal delight is sanctified in the mitzvahs. Elam mitzvahs shem bechinas haratzon malubish oinig behelam. In the mitzvahs themselves, without the study of Torah, all you know of is Hashem's will, and the delight of Hashem in my doing the mitzvah, and on its own is concealed. You just know Hashem wants me to keep Shabbos. Hashem wants me to put up a mezuzah. But you don't feel and see, and you're not aware of Hashem's delight. But the Torah reveals and tells us and teaches us about the delight and pleasure and enjoyment that Hashem has in the mitzvah. Therefore, it's likened to the fire that causes the oil and the wick to be kindled and to light. Concerning this, it says, that wisdom will enliven its possessor. Chachma is Torah, as we know, it's Hashem's wisdom. It will enliven its possessors. Who is the possessor of the Torah? Hashem mitzvahs. The mitzvahs are the will of Hashem that's beyond Chochmah, so therefore the mitzvahs like possess and is the owner, the Baal of the Chochmah. And afterwards the Alter Rebbe adds in the Maimer, top of the next page, another thing we could say, what does it mean that the Chochmah will enliven? Similar to what's explained in a different place, the Pnimius Abba Dafku, Pnimius Atik. The inner level of Chochmah, it's brought down Kabbalah, touches and is one with the inner level of Atik Yomin, which is Hashem's delight of the level of Keser. Asher B'china Zu, this level of the inner delight, the inner level of Atik, Upnimius Hatainu Ge'elyin. It's the inner level of the supernal delight of Hashem. that the will of Hashem is only external in comparison to this inner level of the light. Because of this power that's in the inner level of Chochmah, therefore Chochmah can give vitality to its possessor, that's the supernal will, through the revelation of the supernal delight. So either Chochmah is lower level or it has connected with the higher level of the light. That's essentially what the Alter Rebbe is saying over there, and the Rebbe is going to say they're not two separate ideas. They're one is complementing and adding to the other, or lahoir, and to note, the fact that the Torah says, additionally one can say, it's not just an additional explanation. This is a higher level in Torah itself, where the Torah itself is the level of the light. That was explained in a previous mimer, Sheyesh Beis Dargis in Torah, that there's two different levels in Torah, as the Alter Rebbe explained in a previous mimer. Second paragraph on the page, so this level should come down. Concerning this, it says in the pasuk, Vishnei Zeisim Allah, there were these two olive-shaped type of things that fed into this gula. Echad mina gula v'echad al smoilo, one to the right of this gula, one to the left. What's the idea of an olive? Sheyesh by merirus. It has bitterness. Shehu b'chinas habitol. The level of bitterness indicates bittul. Like for example, with a student, at the beginning of his study, his lips should be dripping moir. So the Chazal explain, al tikra moir el mar. Do not read it moir, but read the word mar, bitter. Through prefacing that my soul, it will be like dust before all. Will be afterwards. Open up my heart in your Torah. That's the idea, just like in Shema we say first, because first we have to accept upon ourselves the yoke of heaven, and then we say V'hoyim Shemoya, which is the acceptance of the yoke of mitzvahs. If we could add Shadugmas Beis Habchinas Torah, now similar to the two levels in Torah that we spoke about. The level of just revealing the will, that's lower, that the mitzvahs are higher, or the inner level of Torah, that's the delight of Hashem. Yesh beis bechinas gambenedus. There's two levels also in the candles. Nedus amigdash from Nedus Chanukah. There's the candles at the base of Migdash, and there's the candles of Chanukah. Shem bedargen nilus yoyser. The candles of Chanukah are even higher than the candles at the base of Migdash. Shalem Amar Azal, concerning the candles of Chanukah, the Chazal said, these candles will never cease, because the candles of the base of Mikdash ceased at the time of the destruction. It's an everlasting thing. And the idea of something being everlasting, this comes from Hashem's very essence, and therefore it's unchanging. This is also what the Chazal say, all the Yom Tovim will cease to be, though this Torah will never change. And the Torah is everlasting. It's explained in a different place. It doesn't mean that all the Yom Tovim, like Pesach and Shavuos, we will stop observing when Mashiach comes. But rather, they will be sublimated, they will be subsumed in the higher revelation, just like a candle has no significance out in the noonday sun. The only exception to this of Yom Tovim that will not be subsumed is Chutz Mechaniko Purim, except for Chanukah and Purim. The key of Shagilu of Chiras Ha'atzma, since the revelation is from Hashem's essence. Therefore, even when Mashiach comes, they won't cease. This is also what it concludes in the pasuk over there concerning the Nevuah Zechariah. Zed Dvar Havaya. This is the word of Havaya. Dvar Havaya zu halacha. The Chazal say that the expression Dvar Havaya, specifically Yud Kei Vav Kei, that has to do with halacha. Shagam halachos. It says also another thing that will not cease when Mashiach comes. Lo yizbatlu lo osid lo. It will not cease when Mashiach comes. Vayidei zeboim la'asiyum loy b'chayav loy b'koyach. Through this we come to the conclusion that Zechariah says, not with might, not with strength, kim beruchi amar Hashem tzvokes, rather with my spirit, Hashem says, bias Mashiach tzedkenu, the coming of Mashiach tzedkenu, she'oz lo yilam lo yidishas re'eu goymer, then man will not teach his fellow, ki kulam yedois, because all will know me, mekatna vad godlam, from the most minor to the most greatest, from all Lord's deus havaya, and the earth will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, kamayim li'amachasim, like the waters covers the sea.